Hey guys. So, for those of you who are about to do the Year 9 end of year exam, I'm just going to quickly do this short revision video to get you prepared for it. Now, if at any point you feel that you disagree with something that I've told you, or more importantly, you want more information, I would highly recommend that you contact your teacher immediately and ask some questions. Okay? Now, this video is going to be up until week 5. So we have at least another 3 weeks that this video is going to be up. After the exam, the video is going to be removed from YouTube. So please ensure that you watch the video and you test yourself. Now, periodically throughout this video, I'm going to be holding up this sign, which indicates I would like you to pause the video and then attempt some of the questions yourselves. After each question, we're going to go through the answers together. And at the very end of it, tally up your marks. And if you go really well in one area, great. If you do not so great in another area, then that might be something you have to work on in particular. All right? So, let's dive in. So here we have a whole bunch of words that are going to be coming up in the exam. What's important is that you understand what these words mean. Now, this image is also on the Instagram page that was posted recently. Now, many of us have heard about alarm words before, but these are some of the most common ones that come up during junior exams. So let's go through some of them. To start with, you have to be able to analyze. You have to be able to compare. You have to be able to describe, discuss, evaluate, explain, and in this exam, summarize. Now, next to each of them, you can see that there's a definition. Next to that is how you set out the information if you're doing it at home, like let's say with post-it notes or something. Okay, so with analyze, you are breaking down into its fundamental parts and examining each in detail, stating its significance. So if I am analyzing a mobile phone, I would look at each of the parts that make up a mobile phone: touch screen, speaker, microphone, camera, battery quality. Okay, and at each of these points, I'm giving some information about each one. When you compare things, you're looking at how they are different and how they are the same. So with the image, you can see it's a Venn diagram. When you're describing something, you are writing about the features of its source of evidence using factual details. So if you're writing a paragraph, you start with the initial statement, then you provide evidence, then you explain, and then you try linking everything back together, okay? So like a typical peel or steal style paragraph. You have initial statement or point, evidence, explanation, and then a link at the end. A discussion. Build up a balanced argument with supporting details. So if you're discussing something, you look at the pros and the cons and you weigh them up, and eventually you make a final decision. And you always provide evidence, because a discussion without evidence is just a flame war online. Evaluate. Make a judgment about or give an opinion on a source of evidence backed up by supporting details. So in science, when we tend to do an evaluation or we do a discussion or a description or whatever, we always try to avoid using first person. I mean, sometimes you can do it, but in some texts, like if you're writing a report or if you're doing an experiment, you avoid using first person writing. Explain. Give reasons or causes for. Show an understanding of how or why something has occurred. So, I dropped this pen. An explanation would be because when I let go of it, gravity takes over and pulls the object down. Okay, it overrides the force that I'm using to hold the pen up. When you summarize something, you are drawing on key ideas and points. So if I were to read a very long essay and I were to summarize it, I might do one sentence for every paragraph that shows up. Okay, it is not going to get every scrap of information, but is giving me the essential bones of the overall assignment, so that way I can explain in my own words what that assignment is talking about without copying it, okay, or without quoting it needlessly. Now for your exam, this is the layout of the test. Now it's not going to be in this order, but these are the crucial types of questions that are going to come up. Remember, this is a data analysis test. It is not a typical memorize a whole bunch of facts and then regurgitate them onto the paper. This test is based about your skills, what you are able to do, not about what you can remember. So you can't really cram for this sort of test. You need to practice. So we have visual literacy, we have calculations, we have text analysis, graph creation, comprehension, and summarizing. 7 different areas. With visual literacy, you have to interpret what a picture is telling you. So if I gave you a labeled diagram or something and I asked you questions about it, using the picture, you could answer them. Calculations is just solving maths problems. You will be provided with the formula during the test. Alright, so all you have to do is read through the question carefully, use the formula correctly, and then provide working out and then a final answer. Text analysis is very similar to comprehension in the fact that you're reading a text and you're answering questions regarding it. Okay, comprehension goes into much more detail. Graph analysis and graph creation talk about how can you read a graph, can you understand what it's telling you, and can you create your own if I gave you a table of data. Summarizing, as we said earlier, basically you are restating information from a text in a simplified format. So if I had a paragraph originally, I want a sentence. Okay, if I had a ton of information, I might want dot points. But in this type of exam, you will be writing a sentence. So let's have a crack at some questions. For this page, we're just going to have an example. Now, the content of each of these questions will not match up what is in the exam. So this question on visual literacy, in the exam, it may not be based on wavelengths. Okay? So don't cram all that wavelength information into your head thinking, I'm just going to copy this. The important thing is that you understand what the diagram is telling you. So, get familiar with different types of visual literacy. Get used to flow diagrams, get used to charts, get used to tables, and being able to understand what that information is saying. So, here are the questions. Question 1. Describe the relationship between the wavelength and frequency. Question 2. Identify the wavelengths of the 3 primary colors, red, blue, and yellow. Question 3. Between which wavelengths can infrared radiation be found? Question 4. What is the minimum frequency for gamma rays? And question 5. Arrange the 8 classes of wavelengths from lowest frequency to highest frequency. Alright. Now, what I'd like you to do is to pause the video, attempt these questions yourselves. Once you've finished, I'm going to start the video up again, and then we're going to go through them. Alright, now that you've finished those questions, let's go through them together. So, question 1, describe the relationship between the wavelength and the frequency. It's worth 2 marks. That means that the marker, a teacher like myself, will be looking for 2 things. So, as the wavelength increases, the frequency decreases, e.g., a low energy radio wave has a very low frequency, but a very large wavelength. The opposite statement is also true. As a wavelength decreases, frequency increases, e.g. gamma radiation. So this type of question, you would have to give both statements. If you provide evidence to support it, fantastic, but you don't need to, okay? Because this says to describe, and as we saw earlier, write about the features of a source of evidence using factual details. So as we can see in the picture, down here we have increasing wavelength. So from this side, we're going all the way over here. These are meant to be negative figures. Okay, that's a typo on their part. That will not happen in the exam. Now up here, we can see that they're increasing as they're going this way. So increasing frequency is going in the opposite direction of increasing wavelength. If it's looking for 2 marks, then that means you might have to give 2 different statements. Alright? Now the answers, they provide the inverse, which means the exact opposite of something. That's the easiest way to do it. Alright? In science, if you can go one way, typically you can go the other. Question 2. If we're looking at the image, we can see down the bottom the visible spectrum has been blown up for us. So we just need to find where the red, yellow, and blue are located. So red is located at the very end on the right hand side, so it'd be 700 nanometers long. Yellow is around about the 600 mark. I'd say close to maybe 610, but if you wrote 600, fantastic, that's fine. And for 500 nanometers is pretty close to blue. Now typically, if they want to give a very specific piece of information, they're going to make it much clearer for you. Alright, question 3. Infrared radiation can be found between 10 to the negative 4 meters and 10 to the negative 2 meters. This one you might have struggled with a little bit. Oh, wait. That was a screw up on my part. I apologize. That answer should be 10 to the negative 6 and 10 to the negative 4. Now, obviously, I didn't read the question correctly. And naturally, I made a mistake, so it was right next to it. When this sort of thing happens, if you've gone through the entire exam and you have answered every question and you have time left, go back over the test. Okay? You need to ensure that you do that. Otherwise, any mistake that you made earlier, it's going to go unnoticed. Going back over with fresh eyes, give yourself a couple of minutes, go back over it again. Make sure that you're able to pick up on these things. Okay? Even try and reattempt the question for the first time. You don't have to write anything down, but in your head, reattempt it. Because that way, you might say, hang on, why did I write this when it should have been that? And then you can just put a line through what you did before if it was a mistake and write underneath. Alright. Minimum frequency for gamma rays. Frequency is located at the top. It's 10 to the 20 hertz. Now, the last question, we have to read it very carefully. Arrange the 8 classes of wavelengths, so the terms that we see in the middle of it, where it has gamma rays, X-rays, UV, visible, from lowest frequency to highest frequency. The frequency up the top says we're going from low, which is on the right, to high, which is on the left. So if you did long radio waves, microwave, infrared, visible, ultraviolet, X-rays, and gamma, you'd be right. Okay, that question's worth 2, because if someone managed to get most of them correct, then you might get 1 mark. If you get all of them correct, you get 2. Alright? Markers are not trying to be unfair towards you. They're trying to give you every advantage, but at the same time, they want to see if you understand how to do the work. Alright, let's go on to the next style of questioning. Calculations. Edward and Alana are trying to work out how many locusts are in the ag plot. They decide that instead of counting them, they're going to take a 1 meter squared sample, which is seen on the right hand side, and multiply it by the area of the ag plot. So what they're doing is an estimation. If the ag plot is 40 meters wide and 80 meters long, calculate how many locusts Edward and Alana, that was a typo, can expect to find using all of the green dots. So we see in the green dots, some of them have out on them and some of them have in. So we're using all of the green dots. If they only use the locus in the square, how much difference would there be between this estimate and the one including all of the green dots? So for the second one, we need to find a difference. Okay, now I'm going to give you a few minutes. Alright, now you've attempted that question, let's have a look at the answers. So for the first question, we have to work out the surface area of the ag plot in total. It says that it's 40 meters wide and 80 meters long. That equates to 3,200 meters squared. Okay, that's a pretty big area. Now the number of locusts, if we're using all of the green dots, we have 9 of them. 9 dots or 9 locusts per meter squared. If that's the case, we times 3,200 by 9. That gives us approximately 28,800 locusts. You can see for this question, you get 3 marks. The first mark is for choosing the correct formula. Now, in the exam, you might get multiple formulas for that question. You have to pick the correct one. Then, we show the working out. We're showing the working out for surface area. The third one is for the total answer, okay? So let's say in this exam, you got the correct formula, you did all the working out, but you got the wrong answer in the end. You'd still get 2 out of 3 marks. If you only guessed the answer, you're only going to get 1. Okay? You need to show working out. You need to show us, the teachers, how you do this. If you have a different method of working out and it still, holds water, fantastic. That's what we want to see, because we can't read your minds. Okay. Question 2 is a little bit more tricky. For this one, we need to find the difference between 2 scores. So before we do that, we need to work out what the smaller score would be. So it says here, if they only use the locusts in the square. In is in capitals, meaning that's the focus. So the green dots here that say in them are 7. There's 7 of them in total. We use the same formula here, 3,200 meters by 7 gives us 22,400 locusts. Now to find the difference between them, we need to subtract 22,400 from 28,800, which gives us 6,400 locusts difference. Alright? So it has gone down by approximately 6,400 locusts. And as you can see, there's 1 mark for each level of writing that's shown. Now, if at any point you're confused about this, for this style of thing, talk to your maths teacher. If you have any other questions, come see us in science. Alright, text analysis. Now, this is a pretty big chunk of text, alright? All it's asking for you is to read through the text and answer some questions. Easy. So, question 1. Where is the nucleus located inside a neuron? 1 mark. Question 2. Describe the purpose of dendrites. 2 marks. Question 3. Compare an axon to an electrical wire. 2 marks. Question 4. List the parts that make up a nerve cell in the same order as the direction of nerve signals. 2 marks. Alright, now that you've had a crack at that, let's have a look at some of the answers. So for question 1, where is the nucleus located inside a neuron? The nucleus is located in the cell body. Question 2, describe the purpose of dendrites. Dendrites are designed to connect to axon terminals from other cells and house the nucleus. Now, if you also wrote, receive messages from other nerve cells, fantastic. Alright, there is nothing wrong with that answer, because that is correct. So if you wrote that down, that's also 1 mark. Question 3, compare an axon to an electrical wire. Now this one, you're going to have to use some pre-existing knowledge. You know how an electrical wire works. It's a piece of copper metal that has rubber wrapped around it. So, for this answer, both axons and electrical wires possess a conductive inner material. So it's an axon and metal wire. That's worth 1 mark. That is coated by an insulative material, myelin sheath and rubber coating. That is worth 1 mark. Alright? Anytime you read a piece of information, in order to remember it, you have to tie that information back to something that you already know. The hardest things to read are often things that are completely alien to us. Like if you read Jane Austen for the first time. It is baffling the type of language that they use if you've never read that style of book before. Also, if you're in science and you're learning about brains for the first time, if you've never heard anything about brains before, it's going to be very hard for you to take the information in because you can't tie it to something else that you know, unless you have very good analogies or examples. Question 4. Dendrites, cell body, axon, axon terminal. The same order as the direction of nerve signals. So if I'm looking at that picture, you're just going from left to right. So it goes into the dendrite, into the cell body, through the axon, out the axon terminal. Pretty simple question. All right, text analysis. Oh, no, sorry. Graph analysis. According to the graph, how much of the substance appears to remain after 2 years, 6 months, 3 years? Describe the pattern of the data shown on the graph. How many years does it take for the substance to appear to be zero? So for this one, you have to be able to interpret what the graph is saying. Now, if you get stuck with this type of question, don't worry. You can always contact us. All right, I'm going to give you a few minutes. Good luck. All right. So, if I'm reading this graph and I want to work out how much the substance remains afterwards, I'm using the information I'm given first. So it says after 2 years. So I go down to the bottom of the graph, find where there's the number 2, go up and find where the blue line intersects with 2. Okay, so where they cross over. Now from that point, I go directly to the left, over to the side where it has other measurements for the percentage of substance remaining. So if I go from 2 up, then across, that's 25% remaining. Now sometimes it's not going to be exactly on one of these numbers. 6 months is exactly half of a year. So exactly halfway between 0 and 1, go up and then to the left, that's 75%. 3 years up and across, that's half of 25, which is about 12.5%. Boom. Now, one thing that we can know about graphs for certain is that they are designed to help us show trends. Okay, we love trends and we love patterns because if we understand how a pattern works, we can predict what's going to happen later. So, after each year, what do you notice is happening? You notice that it is halved. So, after 1 year, 100% has gone down to 50. After 2 years, 50 has gone down to 25. After 3 years, it's gone down to 12.5, and so on and so forth. And it continues to do this. Now, other graphs, they might try to increase or decrease, or they increase when something is added or decrease when something's taken away. The important thing to remember is that the absence of a pattern is also important. Not every graph is going to have a pattern with it. Okay, if a graph is there and it's just random data strewn around and there's no discernible pattern, guess what? That itself is useful because it shows me that there is no link between what is on the x-axis down the bottom and what's on the y-axis going up the side. Okay? Do not come in here with tons of ideas and immediately try to vomit them onto paper. If you come in here with an open mind, you'll be more receptive and you'll be paying more attention to what's in front of you. All right. Now the last question is asking when does it appear to be 0? This style of graph is never going to actually reach 0, but it asks when does it appear to reach 0. And according to this graph, it's around about after 7 years. Now graph creation is a little bit different. So, using the graph provided, you need to create a suitable graph that compares the atomic number of each element to the atomic radius. Ensure to include a title, which is worth 1 mark, axis titles, worth 2 marks, and the data, which is 1 mark, properly displayed. Second question is to justify whether or not there is a pattern in this data referring to the graph that you created. So, there might not be a pattern, or there might be. As always, please pause the video and have a crack at the questions yourself. Alright, let's have a look. This is the type of graph that you should have drawn. Now the reason why we're using this type of graph is because of the stuff that's in bold there below. So, line graphs have x and y axes that are both numerical values. They have numbers. Okay, a column graph, which is where you have columns with spaces in between them, is based around the x-axis having categories. So if I was comparing the element symbol, down the bottom compared to the atomic radius, then I'm going to use a column graph. All right. The bar graph is when the y-axis has categories. So if I had to compare which elements had the greatest atomic radius, I might have the atomic radiuses going all the way down the bottom, and up the side I might have different elements and I want to compare them. You're not often going to have that sort of thing in science. Pie graphs are when all the figures add up to 100%. We're not dealing with percentages, so we're not going to use that one. We're not using the bar graph, we're not using a column graph. We needed to use a line graph. Now, in the exam, you might have data that includes units. If it includes units, you need to attach them to your x-axis and y-axis labels. If you don't, you will lose marks. I can guarantee it. Okay? This type of graph is based on data that did not have any units, so we didn't include them. But if you come across something like temperature or distance or time, they are units. You need to include them. Now, as we can see here, there is a discernible pattern. As the atomic number increases, the atomic radius decreases, based on the information that we've been provided. Okay? At no point does that graph, spike anywhere, or does it change in any way, shape, or form. So it's pretty crucial. Comprehension. So, quickly read through this text, and then have a crack at the questions. All right, as always, I'll see you in a few minutes. All right. So, let's read through that text together. Obtaining food is vital for survival. The food chain is a form of flowchart that conveniently summarizes what different consumers in an ecosystem eat. A food chain begins with a producer such as a green plant or algae. These producers are eaten by a first-order consumer or herbivore. The herbivore is then eaten by a second-order consumer or carnivore. In some food chains, higher-order consumers eat carnivores lower on the chain. So, first question. Food chains contain a maximum of 3 organisms. True or false? It's false. The very last sentence contradicts that statement. In some food chains, higher order consumers eat carnivores lower in the food chain. So, there can be a producer, first order consumer, which is a herbivore, second order consumer, which is a carnivore, and occasionally you can have a third order consumer, or an even larger carnivore. Now, for question 2, provide examples of a producer, first order consumer, and second order consumer, and put them in order that they will be eaten. Alright, so for this one, we're doing it in the thing that's going to be eaten first, then what eats it, then what eats it. So, the grass is always eaten first by the sheep. The sheep is then eaten by the wolf. Okay? So we've got 1 mark if we had all correct organisms. If you chose them and they're completely different, like a banana is eaten by a rhino, is eaten by a shark, then obviously I'm not going to give you marks for that because that's just ridiculous. And 1 mark for being in the correct order. Describe what you think might happen to the rest of the food chain if the number of herbivores decreases. 2 marks. So I'm looking for 2 points of information. If the herbivore population decreases, then the population of carnivores will decrease as well since they have less prey, while the number of plants will increase as they have less predators. So for each of these statements, I have told you what is going to happen, and I've justified my point, which is worth 1 mark. Okay? There are 2 distinct possibilities. Since we chose herbivores in the middle, their population dictates both what it eats and what eats them. Alright? Okay. Summarization. So, this text talks about an electric train in France. What I'd like you to do is to summarize that entire paragraph into a single sentence. Now this one might take a little bit longer if you're not used to summarizing. So make sure the video is still paused until you finish writing your final sentence, and then we can check the answer together. All right? All right. Let's see how you did. Summarize the text to the left into a single sentence. The train en grande vitesse in France is an electric train that regularly travels over 200 miles per hour. Now, this is worth 2 marks because 1, I have correctly stated the information that is located in the paragraph. Okay, there is nothing wrong, there's nothing incorrect with what I have stated. 2, it is a single sentence. Okay, the whole point of summarizing is that you can concisely state what has happened. If there was more text there, obviously I need to write more. Okay, but since there isn't, that's the crucial, that's the important information. Okay, now the other facts and figures and everything else, that's interesting little tidbits of information, and if I need to summarize more, I could, but it said to do it in a single sentence. All right, now let's try this again. This time we're going to be summarizing using your shorthand. Okay, shorthand, essentially you don't have to write a grammatically correct sentence, but you are writing down information that is true. So using dot points and using shorthand, I'd like you to try and summarize the information that's located in this paragraph. For this one, it took me about 8 dot points in order to do it correctly, to get every bit of information. Okay, now this one is non-assessable. There are no marks attached to this. So have a crack at it. Pause this video. Well, pause this video first. Have a crack at it, and then I'll show you what I managed to summarize from the same information. All right, let's have a look. So they generally go in the same descending order. Electrical circuit is path to transmit electrical current. It's very hard to make that even more concise, obviously. Circuit equals power source plus device plus wires. I use math symbols a lot when I'm trying to use my own shorthand because it saves me time. As a bad habit, I tend to write incorrectly. I hold my pen like this, all right, and it tends to hurt my hand quite a fair bit. So I developed shorthand pretty early on, and I started using math symbols instead of writing full words. You can do the same thing if you want, or you can do it a different way. It's up to you. But the important thing is you are consistent with how you write things. Direct current equals current flows one direction. Alternating current. Current goes back and forth many times per second. Series circuit equals current flows one path, no detours. Parallel circuit equals current flows and branches. Current varies, voltage stays the same. And we have 2 examples. Alright. Now typically in class, if you do not understand something and you are just copying it, guess what? You are going to be wasting time. Because A, if you read back over it, it's just going to go in one ear and out the other. You need to practice comprehension. You need to be able to read better in order to write better. And by writing better, you will invariably read better, okay? Both of them are intertwined and you need to practice both. So if need be, with your notes at home, try and summarize an entire topic that you covered in class, whether it was wavelengths or brains and diseases or radiation, into a single page. Okay? Try and summarize all that information into a single page. Now, you can't take the page in with you to the exam, obviously, because A, it's not going to help you, and B, typically if you do that, they consider it cheating. But what it does help is it helps you understand what you have done. If you can't summarize something, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. All right? I'm constantly having to go back over information I've done in the past, and I have to re-examine it, and I have to try and explain it simply to others. And it's good practice. I'm always learning. And you can do the same thing. Alright, so this is the end of the video. If you didn't get the same marks as me, then compare yourself. have a look at for each one and work out how many marks you did get. Just rewind the video, go back over the answers again, see if they match up. If you got less than 20, or if you got less than half for each one, that is an area you really need to focus on. Okay, you really need to practice on. If it's literature based, so if it's looking at text analysis, comprehension, or summarization, maybe talk to your English teacher for help. If it's anything to do with graphs or calculations, talk to your maths teachers. If it's visual literacy, come and talk to us immediately. Okay, or if it's any of it, come and talk to us. We're more than happy to help you. Right. Now, as always, feel free to forward this video to others, or to leave some comments below about something you might need future help with in TikToks or Instagram videos. And if you don't follow us already, use the QR code and follow us. We're more than happy to help. As always, I've been Fori. You guys are going to be amazing in your tests. I'll see you around.